The notification from my security system buzzed on my phone at 2:47 a.m. I was halfway across the country, presenting at a medical conference in Denver, when the alert showed movement at my front door. My heart rate spiked as I opened the app, expecting to see a package thief or maybe a raccoon. Instead, I watched my brother Marcus fumble with what looked suspiciously like a key to my house. My house, the one I'd bought with my own money after 7 years of medical residency and fellowship. The one my family had never even visited. I sat up in the hotel bed, watching in disbelief as the camera captured Marcus successfully opening my door. Behind him stood my sister Linda, my parents, and what appeared to be several suitcases. At nearly 3 a.m., my family was breaking into my home, or rather, letting themselves in with a key I'd never given them. My hands shook as I called Marcus immediately. The phone rang twice before he answered, his voice artificially cheerful. "Hey, Alex, how's the conference? What the hell are you doing in my house?" A pause. "Oh, you got the security alert? Don't worry about it. We just needed a place to crash for a few weeks. Mom and Dad are having the house fumigated, and you know how expensive hotels are, since you're never home anyway? Get out, now." "Come on, Alex. Don't be dramatic. We're family. It's not like you even have a real family to worry about disrupting." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Not like I had a real family. This from my brother, who knew exactly why I lived alone, why I'd moved 3 states away, why I worked 70-hour weeks to avoid thinking about the family I'd lost. I said, "Get out." "Look, we already talked to Mom and Dad. They think you're being selfish. You have this huge house, and you're never even there. Sarah gave us the spare key from when she used to check on the place." Sarah, my ex-fiancée, who'd had a key for emergencies, who'd left it on the kitchen counter when she moved out 2 years ago, claiming I was married to my job and would never prioritize anything over work. Apparently, my family had taken it upon themselves to retrieve it. That key wasn't theirs to give. "Get out of my house, or I'm calling the police." Marcus's tone shifted, becoming the condescending voice I remembered from childhood. "Don't be ridiculous. We're not strangers. We're your family. The only family you have left, I might add." He hung up. I stared at my phone screen, watching the security feed as my family made themselves comfortable in my living room. My father was already investigating my liquor cabinet. Linda was directing where to put the suitcases. Mom was opening my refrigerator like she owned the place. The only family I had left. They had no idea how wrong they were. 3 years ago, I'd been engaged to Sarah and excited about starting our own family. We'd been trying for months when we finally got pregnant. I still remember the ultrasound photo tucked in my wallet, the one that showed our baby at 8 weeks. We'd picked out names, Emma for a girl, James for a boy. I'd called my family to share the news, expecting celebration. Instead, I got lectures about being too young, too focused on work, too unprepared for parenthood. "You're not ready for this responsibility," my mother had said. "You can barely manage your own life." When Sarah miscarried at 12 weeks, I'd needed them. For the first time in my adult life, I'd actually needed my family. Sarah was devastated, and I was trying to hold us both together while grieving the child we'd never meet. I called my mother that night, sobbing into the phone. Her response was burned into my memory. "Well, maybe this is for the best. You weren't ready anyway." My father had been even worse. "These things happen for a reason. Focus on your career. You don't even know how to have a family." My siblings had offered empty platitudes and quickly changed the subject. None of them came to visit. None of them attended the small memorial service Sarah and I held. When I tried to talk about our loss at family gatherings, they acted like I was being dramatic about something that wasn't even really a baby yet. Sarah and I never recovered. She blamed me for my family's coldness, for my inability to open up about my grief, for throwing myself into work even harder than before. She wasn't wrong. After she left, I realized that everyone I'd ever loved had either died or given up on me. So I'd built a life without them. I'd bought this house with rooms I'd secretly hoped would be filled with children's laughter. I'd created a successful practice, earned respect in my field, and yes, I'd worked constantly because work was safe. Work couldn't abandon me or die or tell me I wasn't ready to love it. And now my family, the people who dismissed my grief and questioned my capacity for love, were squatting in the home I'd built from that pain, the only family I had left. They were about to learn exactly what that phrase meant. I spent the rest of the night making calls. By 6 a.m., I'd arranged to fly home immediately, contacted my attorney, and made several other preparations. My family wanted to play games with my house? Fine. But they'd forgotten something important about me. I was a doctor. I was methodical, patient, and I never acted without a plan. The flight home felt eternal. I used the time to research tenant laws, property rights, and exactly what constitutes trespassing when family members are involved. I also made a few more calls, including one to my friend Jake, who happened to be a police officer. "They actually broke in?" Jake asked when I explained the situation. "They used a key they had no right to have, entered without permission, and refused to leave. In legal terms, yes, they broke in." "And you want them arrested?" I paused. Did I? 3 days ago, if someone had asked if I'd ever have my family arrested, I'd have said never. But 3 days ago, I hadn't watched them invade my home while telling me I didn't have a real family. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. When I pulled into my driveway at 2 p.m. the next day, there were 2 additional cars parked there. Apparently, word had spread and more relatives had decided to join the free vacation at Alex's house. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at my own home. Through the front window, I could see my cousin Danny on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, eating what looked like food from my kitchen. The violation felt almost physical. I walked to the front door and knocked. Linda answered, looking genuinely surprised. "Alex, you came home early. Don't worry, we're keeping everything clean. Well, mostly clean." "Get out." "Oh, come on. Don't be like this. Mom made her famous casserole in your kitchen. She's really excited to cook for you. You know how she's been worried about you eating properly." The same mother who'd told me losing my child was for the best was now worried about my nutrition. "You have 30 minutes to pack your things and leave, or I'm calling the police." Linda laughed. "You're not calling the police on your own family. Stop being so dramatic." I pulled out my phone and dialed Jake's number, putting it on speaker. "Jake, it's Alex. They're still here and refusing to leave. I'll be there in 10 minutes with a unit." Linda's face went white. "Alex, you can't be serious. I asked you to leave. You refused. You made this choice." I walked past her into my own house. The scene was worse than I'd imagined. My living room looked like a tornado had hit it. There were dishes everywhere, my bathroom towels were scattered around, and someone had apparently been sleeping in my bed, based on the unmade sheets. My father looked up from where he was reading my mail at the kitchen table. "Alex, good to see you, son. Don't worry about the mess. We'll clean up before we go. Your mother's just excited to have a chance to take care of you for once." "Where is she?" "Upstairs, organizing your closet. She says you dress like a homeless person." I found my mother in my bedroom, folding my clothes and making disapproving noises about my wardrobe choices. She looked up when I entered, smiling brightly. "Alex, sweetheart, you really need to let me take you shopping. These shirts are so plain, and don't get me started on your color choices. A man your age should dress better. What if you meet someone nice?" "Get out of my room." Don't be silly. I'm helping. Look, I've organized everything by color and season. Much better than whatever system you had before. The doorbell rang. Through my window, I could see Jake's police car in the driveway. That's the police, Mom. I asked you to leave. You refused. Now you're being evicted by law enforcement. For the first time, her smile faltered. You called the police? On your own mother? You broke into my house. What did you expect? We're family. Family doesn't call the police on family. The irony was suffocating. Family also doesn't tell someone they don't have a real family. Family doesn't break into houses. Family doesn't dismiss someone's grief over losing a child. Her face flushed. That was 3 years ago, Alex. You need to move on. I did move on. I moved 3 states away from people who treated my pain like an inconvenience. Jake's voice carried up from downstairs. Alex, we're here. What followed was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I watched my family, my blood relatives, argue with police officers about why they should be allowed to stay in my house without my permission. Marcus tried to claim squatters' rights. Linda insisted they were invited guests, and I was just being vindictive. My father attempted to pull the boys will be boys routine, as if this was some harmless family prank. Danny claimed he didn't even know it was illegal since it's just his cousin's place. My mother, however, surprised me. She stood in my living room and delivered a speech about ungrateful children and family loyalty that could have won awards for its manipulation. She talked about changing my diapers, sacrificing for my education, and how disappointed my late grandmother would be in my behavior. Your grandmother would be ashamed, she concluded, that her grandson chose strangers over his own blood. That's when something inside me snapped. My grandmother, I said quietly, would be ashamed that her daughter told her grandson that losing his child was for the best. The room went silent. She'd be ashamed that when I called crying about my miscarriage, you told me I wasn't ready to be a father anyway. She'd be disgusted that when I needed my family most, you treated my grief like a character flaw. My mother's face had gone pale. Alex, you were just, what? Honest? Helpful? Do you remember what you said when Sarah left? You said maybe now I'd stop pretending to want things I was too selfish to have. I looked around the room at my family, these people who shared my DNA but had shown me no compassion when I needed it most. You want to know about family? I had a family, a real one, a child Sarah and I loved before they were even born. We had names picked out, a nursery planned, a future we were building together. And when that family died, when my child died, my blood family told me it was probably for the best. Linda tried to interrupt. Alex, we didn't mean... So I built a new life. I bought this house thinking maybe someday I'd try again. Maybe I'd find someone who wanted to build a family with me despite my history. This house represents hope I wasn't sure I still had. I gestured around my violated living room. And you invaded it. You took a key that wasn't yours, entered without permission, made yourselves comfortable in my home, and told me I don't have a real family. Jake stepped forward. Folks, you need to gather your belongings and leave now. You're trespassing, and Dr. Reynolds has been more than patient. What happened next was a masterclass in family dysfunction. Marcus started shouting about blood being thicker than water. Linda cried and claimed I was breaking Mom's heart. My father tried to negotiate a compromise where they could stay just a few more days. But my mother surprised me again. She looked at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. What might have been understanding or possibly fear. You really would have us arrested, she said quietly. You really broke into my house after telling me I don't have a family. She nodded slowly, then looked at the others. Pack up, we're leaving. Mom, Marcus protested. He's bluffing." "No," she said, still looking at me. "He's not." It took 2 hours to get them all out. 2 hours of listening to lectures about family loyalty, threats about being disowned, as if that wasn't what I wanted, and guilt trips about abandoning my elderly parents in their time of need. The last to leave was Linda, who paused at my door with tears in her eyes. "I never knew you were still so hurt about the baby thing." The baby thing. 3 years later, and she still couldn't say miscarriage. Now you know? We're your family, Alex. Whatever happened before, we're still your family. I looked at my sister, this woman I'd grown up with, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and shared 1,000 childhood memories with me. This person who'd just spent 2 days illegally occupying my home and couldn't understand why I was upset about it. "No," I said finally, "you're my relatives. Family is something different." After they were gone, I walked through my house surveying the damage. It wasn't just the mess, though that was extensive. Someone had broken my coffee maker. My expensive olive oil had been used up cooking that famous casserole, which was now congealing in my refrigerator. My shower had a suspicious stain, and I was missing several towels. But the real damage was harder to quantify. They'd gone through my things, my personal papers, my photographs. My mother had reorganized my closet according to her preferences. Marcus had apparently been sleeping in my bed and using my laptop. They'd invaded not just my space, but my privacy, my security, my sense of home. I spent the evening cleaning and thinking. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I poured myself a drink, from the liquor they'd fortunately not finished, and sat in my living room. My phone had been buzzing all evening with calls and texts from various family members. Some apologetic, some angry, some trying to play mediator. I'd ignored them all. But finally, I listened to my voicemails. Marcus: "Alex, you've made your point. Don't let this get out of hand. We're family." Linda: "I'm sorry about your house, but calling the police was too far. Mom's really upset." My father: "Son, you know your mother didn't mean anything by what she said about the baby. She's just worried about you." And then the last message. My mother's voice, quieter than usual. "Alex, it's Mom. I've been thinking about what you said today, about Emma." Emma. She'd never used the name before. We'd told the family we were going to name the baby Emma, if it was a girl, and after the miscarriage, none of them had ever acknowledged that our child had been real enough to have a name. I think maybe I didn't understand how much that meant to you, how much she meant to you. I thought we were helping by telling you to move on, but maybe we weren't." A long pause. "I don't think I understood that you lost a daughter. Not just a pregnancy, a daughter." Another pause. "I'm sorry about your house, and I'm sorry about Emma. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry." I played the message 3 times before I finally went to bed. The next few days were surreal. Word had spread through our extended family about the police incident, and opinions were divided. About half thought I'd been justified, while the other half thought I'd overreacted and should have just let them stay. But something interesting happened. People started reaching out who hadn't contacted me in years. My cousin Rachel, who'd also struggled with infertility, called to tell me she'd always thought my family's reaction to my miscarriage was cruel. My Uncle Tom, my father's brother, admitted he'd lost respect for my parents when they dismissed my grief so callously. "I wanted to say something at the time," he told me over lunch. "But you know how your mother gets when anyone questions her parenting philosophy." I did know. My mother had always been convinced she knew best about everything, especially other people's emotional responses. It had never occurred to me that other family members had noticed and disapproved. 2 weeks later, I was surprised to find my mother on my doorstep, alone, without any suitcases at a reasonable hour, knocking politely. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She looked around my living room, now restored to its original order, and sat carefully on my couch. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said, about Emma." We sat in silence for a moment. "I brought something," she said finally, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small wrapped box and handed it to me. Inside was a silver picture frame with an engraving, "Emma, always loved, never forgotten." "I thought maybe you'd want to put her ultrasound picture in it, if you still have it." I did still have it. It was in my wallet, creased from years of carrying it, the only photo I had of the child I'd never meet. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I thought I was helping you move on. I thought focusing on what you lost would keep you stuck. But I see now that I was asking you to pretend she never existed, and that was cruel." I looked at the frame in my hands, running my thumb over Emma's name. "I know I can't undo what I said," my mother continued. "I can't take back telling you it was for the best, or that you weren't ready. I was wrong. You would have been a wonderful father, and Emma would have been lucky to have you." For the first time in 3 years, I felt something ease in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. "Why now?" I asked. "Why change your mind now?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Because when I saw how you looked at us in your house, like we were strangers who'd hurt you, I realized that's exactly what we'd become. We'd become people who hurt you instead of people who loved you." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I'm not asking you to forgive us right away. I know we have a lot to make up for. But I wanted you to know that I see now what we took from you, and I'm sorry." After she left, I sat holding the picture frame for a long time. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom and carefully placed Emma's ultrasound photo inside it. I set it on my nightstand, where I could see it every morning when I woke up. It wasn't everything. It didn't erase 3 years of dismissal and pain. It didn't bring back my daughter or repair my relationship with Sarah or undo the isolation I'd felt when I needed support most. But it was acknowledgement. It was recognition that Emma had been real, that my grief had been valid, that I hadn't been overreacting or being dramatic. My child had existed, had been loved, and her loss had mattered. Over the following months, my relationship with my family slowly began to change. Not back to what it had been, that was impossible, but into something new, built on the understanding that respect and boundaries mattered, that love without empathy was just obligation, and that family was something you had to earn, not something you inherited by default. Marcus took the longest to come around. He still occasionally made comments about me overreacting to the house situation. But even he eventually admitted that taking the key without asking had been wrong. Linda started visiting regularly, always calling first, always respecting when I said no. She brought me groceries sometimes, or just stopped by to talk. Slowly, we began rebuilding a relationship based on who we were now, not who we'd been as children. My father struggled the most with the changes. He'd always been the family patriarch, the one whose word was law. Learning to ask before visiting, to respect my boundaries, to treat me as an equal adult rather than an eternal child, was difficult for him. But he tried, and my mother surprised me. She began acknowledging Emma's existence in small but meaningful ways. She'd mention what Emma would be doing now if she were alive. She asked if I wanted to visit Emma's grave on what would have been her birthday. She never again told me I wasn't ready to be a father. One evening, about 6 months after the house incident, I was having dinner with my parents when my mother said something that stopped me cold. "You know, Alex, I've been thinking about starting therapy." to understand why I react to other people's pain the way I do. I looked up from my plate, surprised. I realized that when you were hurting about Emma, I felt helpless. I didn't know how to fix it, so I tried to convince you it wasn't really a problem, but that just made everything worse. She paused, considering her words carefully. I think I do that a lot. When someone I love is in pain I can't fix, I minimize it instead of just being present with it. It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard my mother say. I think that sounds like a good idea, I told her. A year later, I was dating someone new. Rebecca was a teacher, kind and patient, with a smile that made my chest feel warm. She knew about Emma, about my family, about all of it. She didn't try to fix my grief or rush me past it. She just accepted it as part of who I was. When I introduced her to my family, my mother's first words to her were, "Alex is going to be a wonderful father someday." He already was, actually. It was a small thing, maybe, but for someone who'd spent years being told he wasn't ready for a family, hearing his mother tell his girlfriend that he'd already been a father, that Emma had been real and he'd loved her well, meant everything. The house invasion had been a violation, a betrayal that shattered my remaining illusions about family loyalty. But in the aftermath, something better had grown. Not the unconditional acceptance I'd thought family was supposed to provide, but something more honest, relationships built on respect, empathy, and the willingness to acknowledge when you've caused harm. I still lived alone in my house, but it no longer felt empty. Emma's picture sat on my nightstand, a reminder of love that transcended loss. My family visited now as guests, welcomed but not entitled. And I was building something new with Rebecca, something based on choice rather than obligation. The key to my house, the real key, not the stolen one, sat in a small bowl by my front door. Someday, maybe, I'd give it to someone who'd earned it through trust, love, and respect. Someone who understood that home wasn't just a place you occupied, but a sanctuary you protected for the people who mattered most. My family had taught me that blood doesn't make you family. But they'd also taught me, eventually, that family could be rebuilt on firmer ground. Not because you shared DNA, but because you chose to show up for each other, to respect each other's boundaries, and to acknowledge each other's pain instead of dismissing it. I did have a family. I'd always had one. Sometimes it was just Emma and me, her memory and my love for her. Sometimes it included my relatives when they chose to act like family instead of just demanding I treat them like it. And sometimes it was the new people I let into my life, the ones who understood that family was a verb, not a noun. The house my relatives had invaded was still mine. But now it was also a home filled with love, given freely and respect earned honestly. And that made all the difference.